forever in our hearts and in our minds. I swear to Allah, unto my last breath, I will remember.
My dear respected community members, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I'm David Webb, Secretary of AMAF Federation. This video will showcase a number of perspectives from community members on the events of Karbala and their relevance to our lives today. And it will also provide a brief overview of those events. The video is an initiative of a team of AMAF Federation volunteers who felt that there is insufficient awareness of the events of Karbala in the Australian society in general. And through this video, we hope that many Australians will gain a better understanding of not only what happened there, but also the significance of it to today's contemporary fights against oppression.
Through Karbala, people are able to understand life differently. They're able to understand that their lives are not empty or pointless or meaningless, and that injustice doesn't always win. They are able, in that space that is called Karbala, they are able to discover that life has purpose and has meaning, and that justice is worth fighting.
Karbala is all about trust. When they wrote letters to Imam Hussein, come to Kufa, we're with you. Imam says, I have an obligation. People are calling me. People are beginning to realize their duty. They have ignored the duty. That when Allah commanded them, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. Or you believe, obey Allah and obey the Messenger and those vested with authority from among you. We forgot the third group. And a caliph comes, Yazid ibn Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, a tyrant. In 3 years, he desecrated the most sacred institutions of Islam. Desecrated, killed the grandson of the Prophet. He desecrated, he burnt the Kaaba, and he desecrated the Prophet's house and the mosque. Which caliph, in which religion do you know, was capable of doing that in 3 years? Yazid did it.
I swear to Allah, you.
Over 1,000 years ago, 10 days after the start of the new Arabic year, in the early hours of the afternoon on a sand dune at Karbala, south of the current Iraqi capital, a convoy of men, women and children was savagely massacred, and over 100 were killed by an army of over 30,000. It took the monstrous military force little more than 4 hours to completely and utterly annihilate the small group led by Imam Hussein. Fast forward to today, and over 1.5 billion people around the world come to a standstill on Ashura, with gatherings as well as processions distinct with their public outpour of emotion. The passing of a millennium since the day of Ashura has not soothed the pain, nor has it dissipated its inspiring message. To a quarter of the world's population, it is a legend so powerful, it is truly larger than life.
In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. 1400 years ago, on the 10th of Muharram, known as Ashura, the grandson of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Hussein ibn Ali, took a stand against the tyrant Yazid ibn Muawiyah and his depraved institutions. Institutions that induced immoralities and corruption throughout society. Imam Hussein took a stand in order to bring reform to a crumbling society which was increasingly neglecting and abandoning the divine guidance brought by the Messenger of God. He fearlessly rejected the immoral leadership and tore down the walls of deceit upheld by Yazid, who not only usurped leadership but misrepresented Islam. Yazid was distorting the message of Islam for personal gain and punishing everyone in his path in a gross abuse of power. In order to fight against the deviation and combat oppression, Imam Hussein a.s., his family and companions accepted martyrdom. The uprising, unparalleled in history books, was a necessary sacrifice that had to be made to defend the truth and preserve the true message of Islam, the oneness of Allah. Every year, billions of people from all walks of life and religions mourn this day. If it happened so long ago, then why is it that Imam Hussein's martyrdom is commemorated every single year on a global scale? The truth is, Hussein is not the name of a person, rather a timeless model for mankind, and a movement towards the ultimate truth, a movement that aims to dignify its people through reform, with a primary focus on internal reform, revitalizing the words of God. While Imam Hussein's message inspires notions of identifying and opposing oppression around the globe, notably in Yemen, Palestine, Iraq, Kashmir, Pakistan, India, the US, and beyond, it primarily centers us in transcendent truths rooted in a return of the soul to possibly its truest form.
Forever in our
Let us ask time of where she learned to bend her pages, of when the sun refused to enlighten these dark ages of man, and when he lost sight of what is good and what is right. When did she learn to record such episodes of hate and discord? When did man give power to the sword? How did we find ourselves lost in a deathless ward? When did our sleep become a thorny rope, strangling us to an oblivion that mocks at the very shape of hope? When did man realize that for the glitter of the coin, human life is to be confined? How did minds become so frail to recognize that in race, class, or gender our words are entailed? Time then answers and flips her page, taking me to an age. Trembling, resistant, she points the bloody chapter where brutality first learned of its own existence. So I find myself in a castle of blood and stone, embezzled with gold coins spilling out of buckets and carts, men with stones in places of hearts, drooling around the tyrant's throne, dignity ripped to the bone. There stood a woman, girded by locks and chains, holy eloquence coursing through her veins, free as the wind was a sister of Hussein. A rosary of words then streamed from her mouth, a fresh stream of water in a world of drought, the Quran in the rosebed of the words taking sprout. It is divine mercy she lauds, even amidst the chaos she sees nothing but the beauty of God. So strung in her rosary were beads of history, from the first sacrifice of Ibrahim to Hussein's unaccounted for misery, she becomes a mirror through which shines the elegance of this noble trajectory. Sad time, never had it seen the marriage of beauty and pain, so elegant in its composure, so silent in its pain, with the power in its silences, words can only envy to behold, she topples Yazid's power and all that it unfolds. Her power leaps through the pages of time, such that until now, till forever, these throats of tyranny with shackled hands it continues to sever. O Zainab, time cried of your aches, I now see the thorny waste where upon your bruised feet their pathways trace, but this wilderness, this solitude, touched by your blood that flows, not only blooms as fragrant as the rose. So I have now come to grasp that 1400 years ago, when the ocean of purity crashed against the sands of mischief and collapse, the river of truth defines its course against the muds of falsehood that the powerful now tend to endorse. 1400 years ago, that is when the waves of consciousness turned into sleepful nocturne. That is how our morality fell victim to such a doctrine. That is how the night learned to go on without the hope for a day. That is how humanity failed to bloom in such pangs of pitiless dismay. That is when time learned to record the fight between humanity and insanity, the struggle between godliness and immorality. In the bleeding pages of history, this event is stored as the fine line separating the abhorred from the adored.
I can relate to the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam because I know it is difficult to speak the truth when those around don't believe it. As a revert to the Islamic faith, and then a revert within the Islamic faith to the Shia creed, I have had to face some challenging discussions with my close friends and my relatives and many of those around me who have different beliefs. Bibi Zainab binti Ali, who was present at the events of Karbala and who was taken prisoner, called out very specifically these kinds of misrepresentations, these kinds of distortions of the religion through the decontextualization of what might be genuine religious quotes, such as ayats from the Quran. The struggle against oppression is not limited to great dramatic historic events such as Karbala. No. The struggle against oppression, for most of us, relates to small, seemingly insignificant conversations and events. Every day we have a choice. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he made the choice, as an example to us, to not accept oppressive ideology. The lessons that we take from this are particularly profound and particularly significant today because they teach us how to identify that kind of ideology. And for him, that involved the ultimate sacrifice, giving his life. For most of us, the only sacrifice we will have to make is a small amount of discomfort, a small amount of social inconvenience, where people might feel animosity towards us. We can live with that, because ultimately, the future of humanity is much more important than how we actually feel in that moment. Is much more important than fitting in with the crowd of people.
Every time, oh Hussein, you're the love of my heart. You are the light of my eyes. I swear to Allah, until my last breath, I will remember Hussein.